Welcome to the Avive podcast. I'm your host. My name is JF Benoit. I'm the best-selling author of Addicted to the Monkey Mind and Avive, an adventure in belonging. After 12 years of running a holistic addiction treatment center and decades of helping people who have been challenged with conflicts in their relationships, anxiety, depression, and even addiction, what I saw is that the common denominator of our pain and suffering is based on the lack of true connection with ourselves and with other people. Connection underscores absolutely everything in our lives. Whenever we're experiencing distress, when we're being reactive or experiencing triggers, the root cause is often a disconnection and a break in our ability to experience true belonging. So I bring a wealth of experience and empathy, creating a space where you could feel understood and less alone in your struggles. In this podcast, I want to help you tackle the belief that you need to change yourself in order to fit in. A belief that most of us have adopted in our upbringing that keeps creating a tremendous amount of anxiety in our lives. I want to inspire you and guide you to really shed that mindset. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. So with connections with guests like you and interviews, I'm going to help you truly and support you to be your true self, to be able to let go of performing, let go of meeting other people's expectation, and most importantly, really gain the ability to shed all the self-judgments that we have about ourselves. And instead, really focusing on the resilient person that you are, on the courageous person that you are, and building this ability to experience yourself as this innate love and value that exists within you. So I'm really glad that you're here. Let's explore this together in another episode of Avive. Carrie, thanks for joining me again today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Yes.
One of our past podcasts, just a couple back, we were talking about the courage to do what you love. And I was thinking about that. And then I also was thinking about how that seems to kind of tie into when somebody feels really comfortable in their own skin and kind of in alignment with everything. And I was wondering, I kind of wanted to talk about that today, like what goes into someone feeling comfortable with themselves.
You know, it's interesting because so many times, as you saw in the holistic addiction treatment center that we owned, it's like we could ask people oftentimes like, so well, why do you drink? And they would immediately say, well, I just want to take the edge off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we'd say, there's an edge? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's something epidemic in our society about our relationship to our nervous system.
Okay.
Meaning that we often have learned to just ignore the tension that lives in the body. We've learned to sort of push through and just keep sort of doing whatever it is we're doing verbally and with our thinking, at the cost of our emotional body and our nervous system is having all kinds of experiences that are being ignored. Mm-hmm. The people who are really confident in life function very differently. They function from a really solid relationship with their nervous system. A good example with that is there's a book called From Good to Great. And he did a research on leadership, and he wanted to know the great leaders of the world, what makes a good one, but what makes a great one. And one of the things that caught my attention is the mention that he said good leaders struggle with their anxiety. They're trying to almost get rid of their anxiety or fix it or manage it. And he said great leaders thrive on their anxiety.
Yeah.
Now, the other relationship that we don't understand in terms of the nervous system is the value that we associate with our experiences is what's causing the nervous system to feel tense and to feel really stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
So, meaning when I say value, what I'm talking about is that we constantly are defining ourselves by all the situations that we live through, the interactions we have with people, and the nervous system is the recipient of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the recipient of how I measure myself in the world, whether I'm conscious that I'm doing it or not. It's still happening at the nervous system level.
Mm-hmm.
So being aware that if we don't build a relationship with our nervous system and our emotional body, we forever kind of are on wobbly territory, right? We're just never solid.
Well, what does that mean though to thrive on anxiety? Because it seems like if you're thriving on it, then it's not really anxiety. Is it something else like that? I don't really get that statement.
Yeah. Well, and it is confusing, and the research points out that actually that excitement and anxiety are actually the same chemistry in the body.
Okay. So
So
he's just saying turn your anxiety, see it as something to be excited about then.
right, but here's the
Okay.
thing: right, but how do we do that? How do
Yeah.
we actually? Because then what that means is that it's a perception. Anxiety is a perception, and excitement is a perception.
Yeah. Well, I thought of that in like when I was looking at different scenarios where people aren't feeling comfortable with themselves. You can have like even just in social situations where you have somebody that they might be more introverted or they might, they won't necessarily thrive in a group setting. But then I know different people that are consider themselves socially awkward, but they manifest in different ways because one person's like, yeah, I'm socially awkward. I don't care. That, they're fine with being socially awkward. And then somebody else really isn't okay with it. So it can manifest kind of differently, even though they kind of experience the same thing. So I guess that's like a perception then.
Right, and it's also a judgment of how I am either interacting with others or not, right? And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily indicating the level of what's the reason for the anxiety. So for
Yeah.
most people, the reason for anxiety is actually a sense of self that's been put in question in the social setting.
Hmm.
And at my work, it could happen with my family setting. It could happen really in any setting. And the key here is to understand that if we go back to the leader example, the main difference between the two is that the good leader base his own sense of who he is on whether he succeeds or not. So he's facing, leaders face a lot of failure all the time. Their job is to kind of solve problems and put out fires, and it just never stops. And
Yeah.
so one leader perceives this stressful because, and a lot of them are not conscious of it, they're associating whether they succeed at resolving this problem or not as something to have meaning of who they are, right? Meaning they're a great
Yeah.
leader if they succeed at solving this problem, but if they fail, and if the company's at risk, it's even worse, right? The bigger the
Yeah.
issue is, right? The higher the stake, the more they feel the
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah.
Versus the great leader, the reason they thrive is because they don't associate their own sense of self-worth with what they do. They actually reverse it. They go, oh, this will be fun. Let's try this. And if the train
Yeah.
derails,
Then,
and the whole
we
thing,
learned something.
right, exactly. And then the whole train, if it all crashes, then it's like they know that they will still be the person they are. They will still be the leader they are. They're not identifying their own sense of self based on an outcome.
Okay.
So
So
ultimately,
somebody, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, ultimately, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
For all of
Because
us.
because a lot of what you're not comfortable with, you don't even aren't really aware of it. You might be aware of the feeling of being uncomfortable, but and then like a lot of people shy away for from doing that. Like if somebody wanted to join like a dance class, but then they keep postponing it because they're like too embarrassed to, I'm going to make a fool of myself or something. So that is a form of discomfort then that's
And
stopping them from doing something.
we don't realize, right, because of the way we're raised, we don't realize the price we pay for ignoring all the little indication and signals that our nervous system is giving us, that our emotional body is constantly communicating with us. And there's such an enormous cost because it leaves us disconnected from ourselves, right? From the part of ourselves that, you see, in the present moment, doesn't it just exist discomfort? Doesn't just exist anxiety or whatever emotion I'm having. The person that's courageous, that's really strong and resilient, also exists in the present moment. It's not, we're not a positive affirmation that lives in the future. We are actually human
Yeah.
beings who are here now. I was just, I made a little short TikTok this week and a video, and I was thinking about this. I was inviting people to look at how, imagine sitting with your partner. We all, when we've been in an intimate relationship, we really know each other fairly well. But what if you could observe the beingness of your partner? Because we have such a tendency of judging ourselves for, not being up to par, and we oftentimes get frustrated or judge other people. But I'm talking about something different here. What if we could observe the being of the person? And when I say the being, let me give you an example. Let's say with Joyce, what I've observed is if we're walking down the street and we come across an unhoused person, she'll stop, take the time to greet them, look them in the eyes, and oftentimes she'll even carry power bars, with her, and she'll just pull out a power bar and give it to the person. Or,
Yeah.
if we go to the grocery store, she'll look at the people in the eye. Wherever we go,
Yeah.
she genuinely is interested in making a connection. So
Yeah.
as I observe that, who is this being that is doing that? Who is she really? Well, it's easy to identify. She's a deeply caring person. She's a connector, right?
Yeah.
She knows the values of connection and she prioritizes connection.
Yeah.
So that's the being, and it has nothing to do with even the gesture that she does. It has to do with who she actually is, right? It lives in her body, right? So how many of us have really learned about the being, about who we are? Not, right? We're so attached to the way we think. We're like, for the majority of us, when we get uncomfortable, we don't realize that we're a walking performance.
I was just thinking, I don't know, this couldn't just be off base, but I was just thinking as you were talking about how when you have that feeling of discomfort, could it signal something that you care about? Because if you are feeling discomfort about something and you really don't care what the outcome is, then you're not really going to feel uncomfortable necessarily. But if you are thinking, okay, you have a fear of failure, a fear of getting up in front of people and doing this thing, it seems like you have to care a little bit about it to even have the discomfort. You know what I'm saying?
It goes hand in hand. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. It goes hand
Yeah.
in
I've
hand.
never thought of it in that way, how maybe that's showing you something that you might be interested in or might, um,
Yeah, and the caring has to be, again, it's like in the being, right? So we deeply care. We do. But how often do we recognize that? Because as soon as we're uncomfortable or anxious, most people have a judgment. Oh, you shouldn't be anxious.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
how frustrating is that?
Yeah.
I'm having an experience and then the mind says, no, don't have that experience.
Not valid.
Not valid.
Move
Ah,
along.
ex-
Next.
Exactly. You're just, like as if you were a machine, let's just move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
The discomfort is so precious because we can really touch the humanity of who we are. And this is where the the true self lives, is within the experience that we're having in the body. And it's completely separate from the judgment or the mental activity that we keep running. It's not the same. And
Yeah.
it's really unfortunate. I'm really excited about Avive la Vie because the message of Avive la Vie is connection has to be a priority in our lives, right? And connection means that we don't separate ourselves into good parts and bad parts of ourselves. We just know that we have all sorts of experiences, and all those experiences are valid. They're extremely important. And when we learn to harmonize ourselves with those experiences instead of rejecting them, then we also touch the true self, like who we really are, the beingness, right? It's really life transforming. And it seems strange. It's kind of like, the saying, there's no gain if there's no pain.
Yeah.
Well, it's really true about being who we truly are. So meaning that we have to get through a certain level of pain to really touch the amazing person that we are. Right?
Yeah.
And it's almost ironic because I think so many of us don't believe that we have this being, this amazingness, because we're so disconnected from it, right? It's just like
Yeah.
we're so busy telling ourselves we should be different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To
And
belong. And yeah.
and like you said, discomfort really is kind of it can be a judgment, kind of a mindset that we get into with ourselves, because there's plenty of things I feel discomfort about. Like, I don't want to get up and do karaoke, you know? Can I sing? Yeah, a little bit. But that makes me feel uncomfortable.
What doesn't kill you make you stronger.
That's right. Da-da-da-da-da. But anyway, so it's just interesting because I know I'm feeling that discomfort because I can picture myself doing it and then just totally just, flopping and being like, yeah, I just don't want to do that. But it's just kind of a arbitrary thing, because if you really don't care about the outcome, then I love when people go up in karaoke and they don't even sound good, but they're rocking it, you know.
And you know what's strange is as you're saying that, and
Yeah.
so I hear the mental activity saying, "Oh no, I'm not getting up and doing karaoke," right? So I hear that thought. And then at the same time, if I really just tap into being present with the being that's here, I
Yeah.
see a vibrant woman with a
Yeah.
beautiful laugh, a beautiful
Yeah.
smile, a
Yeah.
beautiful energy, who
Yeah.
speaks with absolute confidence and who is
Yeah.
doing this podcast with me, right?
Yeah. Which was outside of my comfort zone. When you first said
Exactly.
that, I
And
was like,
so
"Oh my gosh, I don't know about that."
so
I
so
don't
there we
know.
go. So what's the difference really?
Right. Yeah. No,
And
I
and
know
it's
that on a mental level, but not on the nervous system level yet. So I will do it at one point. My
well
sister's a
here
singer, so I'll just drag her up with me, and
Well, I think it's important to understand not to. I always say to people, if you don't have a certain level of safety within yourself, and then you push
Yeah,
yourself to do something you're not
yeah,
ready for, you
yeah,
end up destroying your self confidence. It's
yeah,
not helpful.
no,
Creating a sense of safety comes from first taking the time to connect with your beingness. That's why I was pointing out, if we start by anchoring the fact that Carrie is a very strong woman. She's a very articulate woman. She's a very, so when we start tapping into what's already there, right, which we don't have a tendency, but
right.
to do because we're so busy thinking that we're not up to par, when we actually connect, and the more we practice to connect with the beingness, then when a time and opportunity comes up to do karaoke, you might be able to tap into that and go,
Yeah.
well, wait a second, I was afraid to do the podcast, but look at me go. And this is fun, and
Yeah.
we're having fun, and I am a
Yeah.
vibrant person. Maybe I can give it a shot at this
Yeah.
karaoke thing, right? But it comes now from a sense of that you have learned through resilience and through paying attention to what has like come alive in you, right? That's already there. This
And you're
powerful
tapping
woman.
into that listening to yourself as to whether or not this is the right time to
Right, right.
do that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's never going to be fully the right time.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing's ever perfect. I hated doing the, we always had to give the speech class, like going up and doing speeches in front of, that was the same kind of thing. It was like, oh gosh, no. I think most people like public speaking, you don't seem to have a problem with that. But most
Again,
people,
Again, I think it really does come down to the ability to notice the difference between the stress and fear and the excitement. So again, it has one source, which is to put the focus on what does it mean about me if this doesn't go well.
yeah,
And we don't realize that that is what the nervous system is, that our emotional body is freaked out about. Is like, what does it mean? Well, the answer is already done and completed. It's like what it means is that you're a moron.
yeah,
If you
yeah.
do public speaking and you
Idiot.
crash, that's, that's
Yeah,
what it means, right?
yeah,
And what a harsh way to treat ourselves. It's like it leaves
yeah.
no room for failure.
Right, right. Which you would never do to somebody else. Like if you're the audience, you don't care in the same way that somebody else is caring about it. Like
And yeah, and not just that, our lives is filled with failures.
yeah,
We have lived through so many of them all over the place. And have we given up and have we just decided we're going to, end it all because
curl up in a ball.
never get out of our house? It's not how life is lived. Life is lived with a lot of moments where we fail at something and then we find out that we're resilient and tapping into that part of ourselves. And not just that, the beingness, the connecting with the true source of the deeply caring and the loving person that we are comes out of all of these moments after moments that life throws one, curveball after another. It's just the nature, right, of being a human being.
Yeah. And it also isn't just like when I'm thinking of the different scenarios, I've used public speaking and that, social awkwardness, but it seems like that uncomfortableness with yourself can manifest in a whole lot of different things beyond that, just those obvious things like people pleasing or being very focused on appearance, like what are people going to think if I don't look, kind of all together. It just seems like there's like low kind of self-esteem. Like it just seems like there's a lot of different ways that it can manifest just so
Yeah.
that everybody listening knows that that's like, it's not just coming up in one way. It's like a whole different variety of ways that it shows up.
Right. And in the context of Avive La Vie, we talk about the false belonging habits that we basically form in our environment, in our upbringing, and they take different forms, like what you're saying, like one being performance, meaning that I start attaching my sense of value and love based on my accomplishment. That's a cliche one that we learn in society.
Yeah.
Another one that is not so well known is how we just learn to prioritize other people and neglect ourselves in the process. That's another form of seeking right to belong. That is a false way of belonging.
Yeah.
There's huge self-doubt for a lot of people, just trying to figure out what other people want from you, like in their
Mhm.
thinking, it's exhausting. The
Yeah.
way that we treat ourselves emotionally, meaning rejecting our experience, we learn to do that as a way to belong, but it never feels like you belong because how can you reject something that you're experiencing and then experience belonging? It just doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
all these different false way of adapting and trying to belong are all at the source of a huge discomfort, right? In the middle of all this is this discomfort that keeps being ignored, that doesn't
Yeah.
get attention,
Mhm.
anxiety being the first one, like the most common one that never, it's like, the most common thing, I mean, you see people, they say, oh, yeah, I went to the doctor and the doctor said, if you don't stop being anxious, you're going to have a heart attack. And,
Yeah.
it's like anxiety is treated as this, as if it's an entity of its own, it's like a wild animal you're not supposed to get close to because it's going to bite you.
Yeah. So is anxiety at that point, is that kind of, we're talking about discomfort, like not feeling comfortable in your own skin, and then anxiety. And can anxiety kind of build up as we're not kind of attuning or feeling comfortable? Those mild discomforts just kind of
Mhm.
pile up and
Yeah.
become anxiety? Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, think of, you know, I often ask people, if you feel anxious and you ignore it, does it go away? Right? Or if you feel even angry and you either implode with your anger and you don't do anything, does it go away? Anything that's restricted in terms of the emotional body keeps festering inside of us. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't have a chance to move through. Emotions are much more like clouds, Clouds they just keep moving. The wind just keeps pushing them in different direction and they move on. And then that's life. Emotions are very much that way. There's a fluidity in a healthy person about their emotion. And it's really hard initially because when those emotions have been blocked for so long, there's also a tendency that, well, there's a huge fear because it's going to be messy once you start, at the beginning of
Yeah.
redeveloping this skill of being
I don't
connected
have
with your,
time for this.
right. But
Yeah.
even when it comes out, it's going to come out messy. Like some people will have outbursts of anger, right, towards other people. And then it's really sad because they're beginning the process of learning about their emotional body. It comes out wrong, and then they shame themselves even more, and then they go back to repressing their emotion once again. And
That's interesting to think of it as in a context as like water, like if your emotions just like you're letting it flow through, but then if every time you have a feeling of discomfort or you're not attuning in, then it's like a part of the concrete of a dam, and then as it becomes, so when it bursts, there's just it always wants to move, it's not wanting to just stay. So um, that's kind of an interesting way to think about it, I guess.
and it's interesting too to really pay attention that emotions, we have oftentimes an idea about emotion that is a mental construct, but that's not the real emotion. That's kind of like having a judgment about what I'm feeling. Or, recently I've been leading groups, and one of the questions I ask is, what is the belief that you carry about your emotions? What is it truly, how you were brought up and what is happening? And it's absolutely crazy making to hear everybody say some form of the same thing, that emotions are just not something you want to deal with.
Yeah.
They're dangerous even.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's insane because that's like saying you being a human is really not okay. We just need to figure out how we can sort of change you so that you don't have feelings,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Let's get rid of
what?
that part. Which would not make it very fun, would it? To
Well,
to be alive.
it's yes, there's pain and feelings, and there's also richness of life exists in the way we experience life. And
Yeah.
the pain comes much more from the mental construct. Every time I guide someone through anxiety, for example, or through a very big emotion they're having, like deep grief or anger, but once they make their way through it, I ask them, was it as bad as your mind made up in your
Yeah.
mind that, and
Yeah.
they always say no. They
Yeah.
always say, you know what, you're right. It wasn't as bad as what I made up. So having an experience is not the same about thinking about having that
That's
experience.
exactly, and that's what gets you stuck. Because I remember when I was stuck in my old family situation, the dealing with the being stuckness and my mental stuckness on it was so much harder, like, to get through than when I actually just made the decision, but that was a huge thing to bear as you're trying to, work through it. So there's so many things that are like that, like it really is the struggle of aligning to what you or admitting that you already know what you need to do, but feeling like that your intuition's not accurate. There must be some um,
Hmm.
workaround that you haven't seen yet to do it. So we really do that to ourselves, really second guess things and just put so much emphasis on the mental part of it,
Yeah,
having it make sense. And it's not going to make sense in that way.
right. And the experience of any part of the mind that is kind of like in a way at war with the emotional body really creates a lot of tension in the body
Yeah.
because
Even talking about it, I feel that tension again, like just
yeah, yeah, and
that
it's
feeling.
it's not something that's avoidable, really. It's like,
Yeah.
but I think for most of us, if we can shift into understanding that the emotional body has an intelligence, and it's so deep, the intelligence that it has, but it's not an intelligence that can be understood with our analytical mind.
That's a hard one, though. That's
It's
really
a
hard
it's a
to do
really
that.
hard one. I
It
think it's
shouldn't be. See, I'm
right,
judging it. It should
right.
not be, but
Yeah.
it is.
Well, it's I think we can demonstrate it through. I think everybody can relate to this. Let's say a time in life when you had a really, really intense grief. Maybe somebody died, maybe a pet died, or something happened, or a really bad situation happened. And if there was one time where you allowed yourself to go fully in that grief, experience all the pain of it, and by allowing all of it to go through, what we know to be true is that at the end of all of this catharsis, what was
Yeah.
left was a sense of peace.
Yeah.
And the sense of peace is that we have returned to ourselves in that moment. So, meaning that all of these huge emotion are created by stories. Like I
Yeah.
always say, if you want to know what you believe, just simply ask yourself how you feel. But the beliefs that we carry can't be changed, only at the mental level. They have to be changed at the nervous system level. And that means that we have to be willing to experience the belief, experience it. Like, for example, if somebody has died, the belief is, I will never have this kind of love ever again. So there'll be some kind of thought that's at the root of this grief. And I can't get past that belief until I descend into the emotion and feel it all. And then at the bottom of that grief, what I found is that I'm still intact, I'm still me, and I'm discovering that through this grief, I actually have this love that exists in me. Even though that person died, I allowed all the grief, and what I'm left with is how much love lives in me. How much love lives also in that relationship. Yes, it's no longer there, but that relationship left me even more with a sense of love in my being, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's so strange because we don't get to that experience of the being because we refuse to engage right with the experience by subscribing to the belief that just keeps festering and said, yeah, we'll never get this love again. We'll never get this love. And whether
Yeah.
we're conscious that that's the thought that we're running or not, it's still the dynamic that we're caught into.
And it's kind of becomes automatic. I had a friend who I always really appreciate different things that she shares because she was talking about on a social media post how she has a certain reaction certain times, like she's out shopping and someone does something rude or some, then she'll have this certain reaction, and she's been really working on trying to change that, like trying to come from a point kind of like what we had talked about of questioning it. I wonder what's going on with them to, have that happen. And she was so happy because after practicing this for, it's probably been a year and a half or something where she was doing it, she said something happened and I did it automatically. I didn't have to think about it. Like it just, my brain, I trained my brain to just automatically do that instead of having to remind it. And I thought that was cool because that it is like something at you have to do very consciously at first, like with great intention, and then it becomes easier to do that until it becomes more automatic.
And it's strange initially to prioritize something that feels so uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It just seems
Yeah.
like the wrong direction to go, at
Yeah.
least to the way we think.
Right, because we've been taught discomfort's a bad thing.
Right.
That's not good.
Avoid pain at all costs, like as if that's a good route to go. It sounds good on paper,
Yeah.
right? But in real life, it's not at all addressing a healthy way of living. It's
Yeah.
the opposite. And it's strange how so many of us are so well intended. That's the part that blows me away. It's just like
Yeah.
even when we react, we're well intended. Behind every reaction, there's a good intention. Always.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what it is we do. And yet we are not able to see ourselves as people who really deeply care, who deeply
Yeah.
love, who are deeply valuable.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and the discomfort is just a signal that's constantly pointing out that we are disconnecting from ourselves, from the goodness of who we are, right?
Well, and we've taken that feeling of discomfort to mean that something's wrong with us instead
Right.
of that.
And then we have all sorts of ways. It goes back to the false belonging habit of what defines an acceptable person in this society, right? You
Yeah.
don't show too much feelings, because that's too much, right? Or
Yeah.
you don't get angry because that's inappropriate. Or there's just all these rules that we have to follow. And those rules don't apply in terms of being ourselves. It's just like you can't edit yourself and say, oh, be yourself now. Now that we've edited the version of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that we've taken out those other parts,
Right.
let's just be yourself.
And then the other aspect is what you were saying, the judgments are piling on even more expectation that it's like not only are you not up to par the way you are, but the judgment add even more to them, right? It just
Yeah.
keeps adding to the list.
Yeah. No, it's true.
It can
Yeah.
be so exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting just to talk about it.
It is. Yeah. It just starts piling up in my head to where I'm like, okay, I'm confused now. Where are we? What's
Yeah.
going on? What are we doing?
Well, I really love that you brought this idea of being a confident person, this idea of thriving in not having to constantly feel like we have somehow something that's not quite up to par for us to, do what it is that we want to do. Like even as simple as karaoke,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
why is there such a rule as there's a proper way to sing? And if you don't
Yeah.
fit that, and it's,
Yeah.
it's so not true when we look at that too. It's like this fear of
Yeah.
somebody's going to spit in our face. I mean, really,
Boo! Get off the
no,
stage.
get off the stage, you moron. And then, but imagine a response where you just go, hey, I'm sucking really good right now. You're missing out, bro. Can you imagine like having self-confidence when that's what we actually respond? Probably
Yeah.
the people around us would laugh, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If
Yeah.
we responded with confidence in our
Yeah.
inability to sing properly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that I've seen that happen many a
and,
time.
and what if we could align ourselves with that truth, right? That self-worth's not dependent on a sort of a quality of service. Like I'm supposed to serve you in
Yeah.
this high quality level. Well,
Yeah.
maybe not, maybe sometimes, but I mean, if I
Yeah.
want to stay in business, probably.
Yeah. Quality.
There was this T-shirt when I was recently in Canada, in Vancouver Island, and we stopped by this little shop, and there was this T-shirt that says, "Be yourself," and then underneath it says, "Unless you suck."
You didn't buy that T-shirt, did you?
I wanted to.
You should have.
I had to stop myself. Like
Oh,
just,
that's
I
funny.
shared it with my partner, and she was like, "No."
That's what I was picturing. I was picturing you wearing that, walking down the street, and Joyce is like, "Honey."
It's really funny because it goes completely against to
I
everything that
know.
Avive La Vie is about.
I know. Well, that's the humor in it.
Yeah. Well, we have to laugh at ourselves, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah. It makes it easier. That's for
yeah.
sure.
Well, I think I'd like to leave the listener with a little bit of some concrete idea and maybe some simple steps that we could take to pay more attention to this discomfort, to this ability to recognize that it's not as bad as we make it. And to really understand that, I think the first thing is that I teach a lot is the ability to pause. Because if we don't develop this ability to pause, the discomfort keeps festering and we never really sort of even acknowledge it because we've become so good at, ignoring it. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the best tool to do that, to pause, is the breath. And it's really simple in terms of, we're just talking about just one slow, deep breath. And in that breath, it's like I breathe from my belly, and I'm amazed how many times now it's completely transformed my ability to become aware of the discomfort that's there. I breathe deeply from my belly, and now it's like, oh, there it is. Now I've become aware. Wow, right? Simple, simple, but that's the beginning. The second tool that I would encourage us to know is that once you've taken that breath, that allows you to follow for a pause. Now, take a minute to yourself, and now like it's almost like having a conversation with another person, but it's a conversation with your discomfort. It's like, oh, I'm noticing, JF, there's some tension there. And then it's like the first thing to do in that conversation is to acknowledge it and just go, oh, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And just that goes against the grain of how we were, taught to behave, right? You ignore your stress, you ignore what's going on. But this begins to build a relationship, right? So take a breath, pause, ask yourself, begin this conversation, And then you just deepen that conversation slowly but easily. What's it like to be tense, and how's it feel? And it's okay. I'm here for you. And treat it like a friend. Treat the anxiety just like a friend and say, tell me more. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
and it could be that simple to establish a connection and a relationship with our anxiety, with our distress, and then to learn to trust it more. And the beauty of it is inviting us to trust that out of that experience, some awareness will come to you. Some awareness around your self-worth, some awareness around how you're perceiving yourself, the judgments you have, all of this. And you don't have to use any of the analytical mind to get there. You simply follow this path of, entering the emotional body and being connected. And it's very, very life transforming. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think this
Nice.
could be
I like that.
solid for people to try. So
Yes, for sure. That helps.
thanks for listening to the Avive Levy podcast. Click on the link in the description below to record one of the questions you may have that we'll answer on one of our future podcasts. Also, I'd like to invite you to be a guest so that we can support you in delving deeper in resolving some of the core issues that you might be dealing with. Don't forget to check out my link for my books, also our newsletter, online groups, and the weekend adventures that I offer. Again, it is extremely rewarding to be on this self-discovery journey with you and to actually get to experience a sense of true belonging.